I recently read a little story, an imagining of twins that a mother was carrying. And these two babies were having a conversation. It's an imagined one, right? So one baby, the first baby, the eldest baby, says to the other, "What do you think is going to be next? Do you believe in life after delivery?" And the younger said, "Why, of course. There has to be something after delivery. We're here to prepare ourselves for what comes next." And the eldest baby said, "That's just nonsense. I don't think there's anything after delivery. What kind of life would it be?" And the younger said, "Well, I don't know, but I imagine it'll be different from what we have now. Maybe it'll be brighter, there'll be light. Maybe we'll eat with our mouths and walk on our legs, right? And it'll be more beautiful than we can even imagine." And the eldest baby said, "That is absurd. Walking is impossible. And who wants to eat with their mouths anyway? Right? We have this umbilical cord that provides us with everything we need, nutrients and air and everything. Plus, that umbilical cord is very short. We cannot leave this world and go anywhere attached to our cord. So, therefore, logically, you're wrong." But the youngest insisted, "Well, I do. I think that there's something better out there, and it may be different from here, and maybe we're not even going to need this cord anymore." And the eldest said, "Again, that is just nonsense. If there were life after delivery, don't you think those who came before us would come back to prove to us that they would come in here to show us that there was life after delivery?" Thank God that does not happen. And the youngest said, "Well, I don't know, but certainly in life after delivery, we will meet Mother, right? And Mother will take care of us." And the first said, "Mother? You actually believe in a mother? That there is some magical mother that exists out there? Where is she now?" And the younger said, "I believe that Mother is all around us, that we are surrounded in goodness in a world that Mother has provided for us, and that we are as aware of her as Mother is as aware of us. Without her, nothing in our world would exist but for our Mother's love." And the first said, "I don't see Mother anywhere, therefore she can't exist." And the youngest said, "Well, I think if you were to be very still and listen very hard, you would hear the voice of Mother speaking to us, always speaking a voice of love." I think that story illustrates somewhat what is happening in John's gospel this morning. We are in the 14th chapter of John, which is Jesus's teachings to his closest disciples on his last night on earth. He is trying to prepare them for life after his death and giving words of comfort and strength. And the disciples are feeling, I think, maybe similar emotions that a first-time mom is feeling before her delivery, feelings of anxiety, nervousness, fear, right? What comes next? How much is it going to hurt? Right? And these disciples are wrestling with the reality that Jesus is telling them that he is going to die and that they will be without their master and their teacher and their Lord. And it's a reality, much like the eldest baby, that the disciples are having a hard time wrapping their minds around. And a few verses before this one, as Jesus is teaching them that he's going away, that he wants them to love each other as he loves them, that he is going away. And Thomas says, Lord, how can we follow you? Where are you going? How do we know the way? And Philip says, oh, you're going to God? Prove to us where you're going. Right? Like that first baby, right? I don't see God. You can't say God exists, right? Mother exists. The disciples are wrestling with this, and they're not sure, and they're fearful. And so Jesus offers them some comfort. He says, I will not leave you orphaned, right? That God never leaves us abandoned and in a place of pain and suffering and sorrow. That God, Jesus, will send us, this Bible passage says, another advocate, a spirit of truth. Now that word advocate, it sounds a little lawyerly to me. Right? That's not exact. So I apologize to any lawyers who may be among us today, but lawyer is not how I tend to relate to God. That's not normally the metaphor my mind and heart goes to. And this word, this Greek word that's translated in this passage as advocate, is the Greek word parakletos, which means the person that comes alongside you. So para means next to, right? Like parallel to two lines next to each other. Right? So parakletos is the person who comes alongside of you to walk with you into things. And because Jesus in the Gospel of John uses this word several times, translators try and flesh out what that means. What is Jesus talking about when Jesus says he's going to send a spirit to be with us, to be God for us, so that we will not be abandoned? And sometimes, because that mystery is so great, the King James Bible actually kept the word in Greek. They just kept it as parakletos, because they were like, it means so much. How can we simply capture it in one English word? And so if you were to look at this in multiple Bible translations, which I have done, the word is sometimes translated as advocate, which really isn't that bad, because if you're in a spot of trouble, right, and you're going to court, who do you want, right? Well, then you want an advocate, a lawyer, to walk aside of you. But sometimes in life, we don't need that. What we need is somebody who will be the one to encourage us in our trials and our struggles. Right? So sometimes parakletos is translated as encourager or helper, right? The one who helps us, understands with us when we're struggling. Sometimes parakletos is translated as counselor or companion. Companion actually is a wonderful, that's probably the closest English word that we have to somebody who's meant to travel alongside us. And all of these words, I think, also are beautiful words to describe not only God's Spirit, but God's representations of love here on earth on this Mother's Day. Right? mothers who have been for us encouragers and helpers, right? Sometimes the ones who are advocating on our behalf, right? Our companions through our life. And Jesus says that this is who will come next, this Parakletos, this companion, and this spirit of truth. And I know that many times in my life, I wish I listened better to that companion than I sometimes do. That I listened or looked more for a spirit of truth to be my companion in life. Because too often I listen to other spirits, other companions in life who try to offer me guidance or direction, but maybe not exactly the way that God's Spirit would. I listen to this way too much. Right? Listen to my phone, right? These aren't really the spirit of truth for us, right? Sometimes they're good when we're like, hey, Google, how far is it from here to Nashville? But if we were to ask it for other things, probably not going to always give us the truest true. Okay? They kind of can be spirits of misinformation. And I try really hard to not spend so much time on my phone. I've taken off many of the social media apps that lead me down other spirits where I follow other spirits that aren't quite as true. Because then when I'm listening to them or watching them and taking in that information, I suddenly feel less than. I feel less worthy, that my life is not as pretty or shiny or quite as depicted as sometimes this spirit leads me down. In fact, we often even use some of that same language when we talk about AI or algorithms, right? Things that are guiding us, pointing us in a certain direction. The more you click, the more you get, those kinds of things, right? That's one kind of spirit. But that is not God's spirit of truth for us. God's spirit of truth tells us that we are already worthy. God's spirit of truth tells us that we are already beloved of God, and that there's nothing that we can do to make God love us more or be more worthy of that love. These other spirits, that's not what they tell us. So how can we know? How can we know which spirit is the spirit of truth, the Parakletos sent to guide us? I think it goes back to words that Jesus is telling the disciples as they are going to need to also figure this out in their life once Jesus is gone. And Jesus points them back to his commandment, which in the Gospel of John, he says, I give you this new commandment, that you are to love each other as I love you. In the other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, Jesus says, here is the greatest commandment. You need to love God with all your heart and soul and mind, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. It all points back to love. When we're trying to discern the voice of God's Spirit in our life, we just need to listen. Does it sound like a loving voice? Because that is the only voice that God, our mother, ever uses for us, a voice of love. The other spirits of this world, never speak to us in words of love. But God's Spirit always does. To quote the Beatles, all you need is love. Okay? All you need is love. All you need is love, love. Love is all you need.